All right, welcome to the explainer. Have you ever looked at someone and wondered, what's the difference between just looking spiritual and actually being spiritual? That's exactly what we're digging into today. We're going to explore that gap, that tension between putting on a show of faith and having that deep inner conviction that really only shows itself when things get tough.
I mean, we've all seen it, right? These big, grand displays of spirituality. People right up front on stage, leading the way, looking the part. But what's actually going on inside their heads, inside their hearts? And that's the real question we're tackling today. What happens when that outward devotion gets put under pressure?
And let me tell you, the sources we're looking at, they do not pull any punches here. They talk about these pretenders, right? People who look immaculate on the outside, but are, and I'm quoting here, glutted with filth of sins within. It's all a performance, a street show, they call it. And yeah, it might look good to other people, but it's basically a house of cards just waiting to fall.
And hey, don't think for a second this is just some old, abstract idea from centuries ago. Nope. The sources point to how this is happening right now, today. One even talks about this modern fashion, their word, of people basically tripping over themselves to sit at the front during services. Why? Not always for devotion, but to make sure they get seen on the YouTube live stream. It's crazy, right? It just turns piety into a performance, more of a status symbol than anything real.
Okay, so this begs the question, right? Why does this happen? What is the real internal difference between just performing and genuinely practicing? To really get to the bottom of this, we need to look at a framework the sources give us. It's called gurmat, or the guru's wisdom. Think of it like a special lens that helps us see what's really motivating our actions. So, what exactly is gurmat? Well, at its heart, it's this idea that faith isn't just some intellectual thing you think about. No, it's something you have to live day in and day out. It's a path where you're guided by the guru, whether that's a teacher, scripture, or divine wisdom itself. And it's this total focus on action and living the faith that really shows us there are two completely different ways people can operate.
And this, right here, this lays it all out perfectly. You've got a huge contrast between two ways of being. So on one side, you've got the manmoth. This person is all about themselves, self-oriented. Everything they do is for show, for recognition, for wealth, for ego. Their faith, it's really just a tool to get ahead in the world. But then, on the other side, you have the gurumukh. This person is guru-oriented. They're guided from the inside out by a connection to that divine wisdom, not by what other people think.
You see, that self-oriented approach, it creates this deep spiritual hollowness inside, and the sources are super blunt about it. They call someone in this state a walking dead body. You can have all the right clothes, say all the right things, but if that internal connection isn't there, you're just an empty shell. And that emptiness, well, it has some pretty serious consequences when life decides to throw you a curveball.
Yeah, because when a real test comes along, fear, corruption, pressure from leaders, that's when the mask just drops. For the self-oriented person, that lack of a real connection to the guru, to that wisdom, it leaves them totally vulnerable. They end up being ruled by fear, not by faith.
And what does that fear do? It turns them into conformists. They get described as highly suggestible, which means they're easy to control, and they fold, immediately under pressure. Because their faith was never really theirs to begin with. But here's where it gets really interesting. Gurmat talks about a totally different kind of fear. It's a fear that doesn't make you a coward. In fact, it makes you fearless.
And this is the key distinction right here. So on the one hand, you have worldly fear. Fear of what people will think, fear of losing your job, fear of getting hurt. That's the fear that makes you compromise, that makes you a coward. But a gurmukh, a guru-oriented person, is driven by a loving fear of the guru. Now, this isn't terror. It's more like a profound, respectful love. It's an awe that actually makes you fearless when you're facing all those worldly pressures. It makes you totally uncompromising on what you believe is right.
Okay, so that's the theory. Sounds good, right? But what does it actually look like in real life? Well, the story of Bhai Randhir Singh is this incredible real-world case study of someone living these principles out loud. So early on in his life, Bhai Randhir Singh lands this pretty prestigious government job. But right away, he runs headfirst into a corrupt system. We're talking bribery everywhere, from the very top to the very bottom.
And he figured it out pretty quick. He realized that just to stay in that job, even if he wasn't taking bribes himself, just by being part of it, it was a massive spiritual compromise. Basically, he'd be selling his soul and damning his faith just to have a successful career.
So here's the test. What does he do? Well, first, he actually spoke up. He went to his British superiors and called out the corruption. But when he saw that the whole system was just rotten to the core and wasn't going to change, he did something pretty radical. He resigned. He just walked away from it all. Think about that. He gave up the career, the status, the money, the security, all of it, because his principles mattered more.
This right here is gurmat in action. It's the ideal put into practice. His actions are a perfect example of true fearlessness. And like the source says, that kind of fearlessness only shows up when there's no greed, no attachment to worldly stuff, and absolutely no compromise on your core truths. And look, this wasn't just a one-off thing for him. This principle was his compass for his entire life. He didn't just stand up to the British rulers. He also called out his own community leaders when they were being servile or too scared to do what was right. He ended up in prison. His life was threatened. But his conviction, his inner strength, it never, ever wavered.
So all of this, it brings the focus right back to us, because the sources are basically laying out a choice for each of us. They say the enemy of that fear-driven, conformist mindset isn't some big, dramatic gesture. It's something much deeper. It's a personal, consistent, internal practice. It's about building that spiritual foundation through things like Nam and Bani, meditation, and studying wisdom, so that when a test comes, and it will, you're strong enough to face it.
You know, at the end of the day, this isn't really about pointing fingers at other people and judging their performances. No, it's a call for some serious self-reflection. The real game, as one source calls it, is about love and devotion. It's about how we react in our thoughts and in our actions when life happens to us and our own faith gets tested. And so we're left with this one last really provocative question. It's asking us to look past all of the external stuff, not just in other people, but in ourselves too, and to ask honestly, when the pressure's on, when a real choice has to be made, who are you going to be? Are you going to be guided by worldly fear or by that fearless inner conviction?